Hello, everybody. Even though there's probably only me and you here, Chow. Okay, hopefully this is running now. There may be a little bit of a delay. I should be streaming. I think it is. All right. I'm in the habit of going around the internet looking for interesting Bible discussions and whatnot. Good to see you, Jugglefish. And I keep coming across this claim about the plurality of Abel's blood crying from the ground in Genesis 4:10. And people usually only stop where the person asking this question stopped. This is from Stack Exchange, hermeneutics.stackexchange.com. And you find a lot of good material there, but you'll get different answers depending, different perspectives people answer from. And you have to wade through those. And that's the point of this video, is testing everything. So let me show you the page I'm talking about here. I almost forgot to do that. And so the question is, and we're going to walk through what I do when I come across this stuff. The question is, when trying to understand the meaning of the cry of Abel's blood as recorded in Genesis 4:10, I found this article which reads, I hear your brother's blood crying to me from the ground. In Hebrew, the word blood is plural, bloods, whereas translations use the singular form blood. I was not aware that blood is translated from bloods in Hebrew, and if I omit blood and insert bloods into the text, it would appear to change the meaning of the text as follows. And then it says, your brother's bloods cries out to me from the ground. And it says it would point to Luke 11:50-51 to explain his reasoning. And it says, the quote here, and he gives a source for that. Killing and human violence, however, do not stop in the biblical story, nor are they stopped in contemporary world. Jewish and Christian interpreters across the centuries have seen in the Cain and Abel story a precursor to future murders of innocents up to the present day. For them, the plural of bloods in Genesis 4:10 and 11, and the present tense of the verb is crying out in Genesis 4:10, point to the blood of later generations still crying out to God in a desperate plea for a reckoning. And this is what I myself have seen too, from people who are relatively well studied. And so we can't say they're stupid or ignorant, but there is a problem here, and we need to get to the root of that problem. Good to see you, Christian. And so they ask, why is bloods translated singular as blood in Genesis 4:10? And there's some comments there, but I want to go down to this one that says, it has a quote here, and we're going to see who from. You might guess from the links in the description who this is going to be. It says, finally, the distinction between blood and bloods requires to be specially noticed. The singular is always used, this is the key, when the blood is regarded as an organic unity. Hence also of menstrual blood and the blood of sacrifices collected in the basin and then sprinkled. And in Numbers 23:24 of the blood gushing from wounds. On the other hand, as a sort of plural of the result and at the same time of local extension, denotes blood which is shed, which it appears as blood stains or as blood marks. But since blood stains or blood marks as a rule suggest blood shed in murder, although it also can refer to childbirth or circumcision, acquired even in early passages, simply the sense of a bloody deed, and especially blood guiltness. Now, what does all that mean? That is from, depending on who you ask how to pronounce it, Gesenius. This is as far as I could tell how to pronounce this name. Anyway, he says, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but from the source, Gesenius 1:24, and we're going to learn more about him, it's apparent that bloodshed, which was the case with Abel, is given a plural form due to the action of the blood flowing from the wound inflicted rather than one singular event. Okay? Therefore, your point is well taken. Abel's blood being plural speaks to a continuous sacrifice. The author of Hebrews quotes in Hebrews 12:24, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks of better things than that of Abel. What's apparent is that Abel's blood, either from the sacrifice he made or the fact that he in effect became a sacrifice, is superseded by the continuous sense bloodshedding of Christ. And then he talks about, another answer talks about more than that and different opinions, etc., etc. But the point here, I think, is a quote from Gesenius that it has to do with shed blood. Okay, so it's about the shedding of blood, not, as the questioner posed, from things that they had read, that it has to do with any kind of descendants. Okay, good to see you, Spider Monkey. So it's not, when somebody says, oh, look, it's plural here, your bloods cry out to me from the ground, that this means it's talking about any children he might have had. And first of all, I would point out, in addition to this, that when the Bible talks about children or descendants, it uses the word seed or seeds, not blood. Okay, so why is it plural? And that's what Gesenius says, is that it has to do with the blood being shed. Okay, so it's the flow of blood, not that it has anything to do with seed, because otherwise the word seed would be used. So that's the short answer of why bloods is plural there. So if you encounter anybody making this argument and saying, well, it's a midrash that says this, I forget, I think the original questioner did that. Yeah, they said it's taken from the midrash that seems to make the argument, as well as others, and he gave some sources, that it's about the blood of all those who would die by unjust means, or their descendants that would never be born because they died, even though they may have had descendants before then. But those are simply not true, according to Gesenius, who said it's about the flow of blood, about blood by violence in some way. Okay? So now, first we'll start with good old Wikipedia, because in some cases it doesn't have any reason to be biased, but you can compare it with others, and that's what we're going to do, because we're going to be thorough. Anyway, the guy was born in 1786 and died in 1842. And he was a German Orientalist, meaning he studies the East, a lexicographer, which means having to do with making dictionaries, Christian Hebraist, looking at I don't know if that means Jewish roots, for example, which I would be very much against. And again, this is why I had that thumbnail about taking the best, because you can't always just throw the baby out with the bathwater, throw away everything just because some of it's bad. Now, when it comes to mixing truth with error, we absolutely do need to throw out the bad, but we have to examine it to find out what the truth and the error is. So that's what we're going to do here. But it's just to give an idea of who this guy is and why we should listen to his quote on the meaning of bloods plural. Says he is born at Nordhausen, became a student of philosophy and theology. Then he got into some other things, and he became a very respected teacher and professor of Hebrew and other things like that, but especially of the Hebrew language. And he was very much sought after by other universities. It says he taught with great regularity for over 30 years. He was a gifted lecturer whose lectures were so interesting that his lecture room was consistently filled. By 1810, his lectures were attended by more than 500 students, nearly half the student population of the university. He had some interruptions when he went touring and studying and so forth. He became the most popular teacher of Hebrew and Old Testament introduction and exegesis in Germany. And during his later years, his lectures were attended by nearly 500 students. Again, that number seems to pop up. And they give some names of people who went on to also be scholars in their own right. He did a Hebrew lexicon with German text in the early 1800s. Then he went through many revisions and things. Just going through here real quick. And it says, Gesenius takes much of the credit for having freed Semitic philology from the trammels of theological and religious prepossession, and for inaugurating the strictly scientific and comparative method which has since been so fruitful. And let me break that down a little bit, because sometimes when you go looking for all these cross-examinations, these sources, it's hard to figure out what they're saying sometimes. And philology, first of all, is the study or the love of words. That's a couple of Greek words put together there, but it's just studying the meanings of words, their grammar, how they, which is how words relate to other words in the sentence around them, which is an indispensable part of the context, because you can't just pick a meaning of a word and drop it into another context. They call that helicopter theology, but you can do this with word meanings as well. And you shouldn't, because words get their particular part of their semantic range from the words around them and their grammar and so forth. So that's what philology has to do with. He was also an exegete, which means to interpret, and to apply a hermeneutic, which is a method of interpretation. He had a powerful influence on theological investigation. But again, as I've said many times in the past, you don't have to be a believer to be an expert in language. And experts in language have been used for almost every translation, whether they were believers or not, because they're experts. So we don't go to unbelievers for interpretation. We go to them for linguistics. We go to them to do, for original research, for understanding the nuances of language and figures of speech and all that sort of thing. Yes, there are believers doing that, but sometimes the best expert is an unbeliever, and sometimes it's a believer. You go with the best expert when it comes to what the words mean. This is why I have critiqued Michael Heiser in the past. Even though his expertise was in Semitic languages, he's not the only expert, and there are other experts who disagree with him. But when he's talking to someone who is not an expert, he's the subject matter expert when you're talking about ancient Semitic languages. And so just all sorts of things to keep in mind. Heiser was right about some things, wrong about other very important things. And the same can be said about his many detractors. And but the same goes here, where this Gesenius, as far as I know, was a believer, but his methods in just studying the technical aspects of language are what his important contribution, as far as I can tell from what I looked at. And so it says he may be considered as a founder of Phoenician studies, was aware of previous efforts at dictionaries in Biblical Hebrew. He provided an extensive survey of Hebrew lexicography, an 1823 edition of his lexicon, contributed to other previous lexicons, and which had simply translated Hebrew expressions as whatever other versions, primarily the Septuagint and Vulgate, had in the same verses. So he amplified those things and said, you're being too simplistic, you need to check this, this, and this. So his contribution was the inclusion of insights obtained from the study of other languages, ancient and non-Semitic. So from his extensive body of work, his best, what English-speaking readers are most familiar with, is his Hebrew grammar, best represented by an English translation of the German edition by Oxford University Press in 1910. He has a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament scriptures, all sorts of things. But I'm going to just go straight down to this summary here. Edward Robinson, acquaintance of his, and the principal English translator of his work, and his biographer, said, so clear were his conception that he never uttered a sentence, no scarcely ever wrote one, which even the dullest intellect did not at once comprehend. And just to stop and say, that means if you really know what you're talking about, you can explain it in the simplest terms to the simplest person. So when people say, this is too complicated for you, I can't explain it to you, they really don't know what they're talking about. They may say it takes time. I will explain to you, little by little, that's fine. But if they just brush you off, they really don't know their topic. So this guy, Gesenius, knew his topic. And it goes on, in this respect, he may be said to stand almost alone among modern German scholars. In all that fell within the proper sphere of his own researches, he never rested upon the authority of others, but investigated for himself with all the minute accuracy and closeness of detail and unwearied industry, that means he was tireless, for which German learning is celebrated. His one great object was philological truth, that is to say, to know what exactly the words meant. He had no preconceived theories, to the support of which he was at all hazards committed, and in connection with which only he sought for truth. These traits, combined with his extensive learning, inspired a confidence in his researches and opinions on topics connected with Hebrew philology, such as has been bestowed on few scholars. So he was a top-rate scholar. That's the whole point of this, is who is this guy we're treating with such respect in his quote on what the meaning of bloods is in Genesis, when Abel's blood was spilled. Okay, so now we're going to go to this. This is where you can find the study light. This link is also in the description of his Hebrew grammar. And it has a brief bio here, and it says where he was born and all that. So I don't know if I had anything to add to that, really, but mainly I just wanted to show that you can actually go and see this lexicon and or grammar, sorry. So now I want to get into this thing, which is it says, I think I also have this in the description, biblicalhumanities.org, some message board, where they get into who he was. It's the object, or the title of the thread is I can never say it right. I don't know if they spelled it right. Genesius. Yeah, it doesn't look right for some reason. Anyway, not biblical Hebrew. And he starts off with a quote of someone else. Says, you mention all current scholars and grammarians as well as teachers of Hebrew. How many of them have read the Tanakh completely? I expect the answer is 0. That's my experience. They know all the major professors and the minutiae of what they have to say about the language. They've studied Canaanite languages such as Ugaritic, etc. But how many or how much do those studies help in understanding the quirks of biblical Hebrew? Why wouldn't those studies work against a person's ability to get a working feel for a Hebrew language? And then the response here is what I wanted to look at. It says, let's get one thing out of the way here. Neither the Masoretes, God, I can't even remember how I was saying his name now because it just looks like it's spelled different or something. I forget. Let me go check. Gesenius. For some reason, my brain just couldn't remember how I pronounced that because it's not how I used to always pronounce it. Gesenius. Neither he nor the Masoretes nor anybody else who studies or teaches biblical Hebrew, that's what BH means here, is or was perfect. The fact that people and scholars are imperfect does not give us carte blanche to dismiss any contributions they may have made because they came to conclusions that's different from our own. That was my point about Heiser and so forth. Not to say our conclusions may not have value, but it's best to avoid the Lone Ranger mentality when it comes to language study. The value of cognate language study is that it often sheds light on rare Hebrew words that even the ancient versions, including the Samaritan Pentateuch, Greek versions, Latin versions, Syriac, etc., seem to have not understood at all or misunderstood. That's a bold claim, but whatever. At the very least, it's a resource that should be considered when translations and scholars disagree on what is meant by a rare Hebrew term or a hapax. Hapax means the one time that you see something. There are words like that in the Greek New Testament, and people like to, or translators and commentators and people who should know better and do know better but refuse to speak it, should bring out on passages, especially the ones regarding women, where there are several of these unique words that they just gloss over, because these would cause them problems in their hermeneutic, in their claims and their books and everything. They have something to lose from that. Mostly pride, and I've gone over that before in my UR1 series. But anyway, they're from the same linguistic family, after all. In the same way, Latin and Greek often shed light on each other, when considering difficulties in text and in these languages. The value of this study has been repeatedly demonstrated, as in the cases of Akkadian and Ugaritic. Of course, any such study has its potential pitfalls, but that does not negate the potential rewards. So I could, because I don't agree with Genesia, I can't say it again. I used to say, people say Gesenius, but it, Gesenius. I'm trying to teach my brain a new pronunciation, so I keep stumbling there. Gesenius. It sounds a little bit like genius. If I remember that, maybe that'll work. But anyway, there are things he concluded that I don't agree with. Okay? Just like Heiser and a lot of other people. But it doesn't mean I don't have something I can learn from their area of expertise, which isn't theology per se, understanding what the text is really teaching and whether there's a difference between Christians and Jews and so forth. That's a whole different ballgame. His area of expertise was language. Anyway, he says, I haven't done any polls or surveys about the Tanakh reading habits of scholars. However, from my own experience, I draw a different conclusion than you did about their competence. I took 4 biblical Hebrew courses under a professor with a PhD. We studied the basic vocab and grammar. Then we did 3 reading courses. We looked at and translated passages from Genesis, Samuel, Ruth, Psalms, and Jeremiah. In every case, the professor clearly was at home in the Hebrew text and had no difficulty whatsoever explaining it from a Hebrew perspective. He said prospective. At least in this case, I would wager that he had read the Tanakh in Hebrew numerous times, long before teaching his Hebrew courses. Similarly, I can tell from comparing my own reading and the readings and grammar commented on by numerous Bible commentators and Hebrew scholars I've read, that they too must have read the Tanakh thoroughly in Hebrew many times. So people were trying to say, and he's responding to that because they reached some conclusions we don't like, that they must be thrown out completely. You just can't do that. And then we have another quote from the person he's responding to, says, my criticism of Gesenius, I'll get it someday, is even stronger when it comes to his dictionaries. Not only were they derivative, which means not primary source, not based on original research, but he was one of the founders of a school of teaching that was later named JEPD, then JEPDR, from critic or whatever non de jure it has today. And by the way, those are things I strongly disagree with as well, because they're trying to make the Tanakh written by a committee, basically. Good to see more people. Dr. Bose in the chat. Anyway, he's saying this is why I don't like Gesenius. And he says his dictionaries were designed to push that teaching. And BDB, I forget who he was referring to there, continued that tradition. The professor who taught the class where I first learned Hebrew had us all buy Gesenius dictionary. The more I read Tanakh, the more I noticed Gesenius definitions don't match the context. I bought Lisowski's concordance in order to do original research and noticed that Lisowski's glosses tend to follow actual uses more closely than Gesenius. And then the response to that, because he's knocking Gesenius, is just because a work may have depended somewhat on earlier works in the same field does not necessarily make it valueless. All dictionaries in all languages have this defect. In other words, so what, it's derivative. Everything is, if you want to consider it as such. Your own dictionary came about eventually after your use of Lisowski. So even if Lisowski did his work from scratch, your own dictionary is derivative. Does that make it worthless? I think not necessarily, as I've downloaded it and used it along with various updates. Okay, so he's dismissing that critique on the grounds that it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, you can't escape it. And then he says, I would caution against rejecting out of hand a linguistic work simply because you may disagree with some or all of the compiler/editor's theology or religious beliefs or lack or such. And I would point this out about dispensationalism. People do that all the time. Because Darby, because Schofield, therefore throw out everything they believe. Well, they also believe Jesus rose from the dead, so do we got to throw that out too? Why not? Anyway, going on here, the two do not necessarily bear on each other. To give a Hebrew example, even Shoshan's Biblical Hebrew Concordance is a valuable tool. I do not know his religious background, though it may be that he is an observant Jew. But whether he is or not has no bearing on the value of his work for learning Hebrew, not for learning Bible, unless it could be shown his beliefs have biased his handling of the Hebrew text. I'm not aware of such, if it exists. To use a couple of New Testament examples, William Barclay and A.T. Robertson both have produced useful works that illuminate the Greek New Testament and the Koine, or common Greek dialect, which the New Testament was written in. They're pretty well polar opposites when it comes to their theological beliefs. So both of these people, who are at loggerheads to each other, both contributed very much to the understanding of New Testament Greek. And he goes on, I can look past disagreements with their theologies when they shed light on the Greek. Once in a while, they slip up and use faulty Greek arguments to support questionable theological conclusions, in my view, but their overall value is without question, in my opinion. You and I both regard the JEPD school as mistaken. And again, that JEPD is a favorite of anti-Christians. However, that view of his does not necessarily devalue Gesenius lexical and grammatical studies. I expect, as has happened before, that you and I will agree to disagree on him and the Masoretes, and that's fine. So that's mainly what I wanted to just go over today. I had this material just sitting on my desktop and finally decided I should actually go live with it while I still have a bunch of things in my head. But the point again is where we started, is that people will quote one thing, and because it's a midrash from the Hebrews, then they are the authority and you can't disagree with them. Never mind that the Jews disagree among themselves just like everybody else does. Even in Christianity or anything, Islam, I don't care what it is, people are internally disagreeing about stuff. So you can't just take one source. But I've seen people do that. That's what happens, especially on the internet, is people get one source and a bunch of people spread that, and then another layer down the line will say, look at all those people spreading it. It must be true. Look at all these witnesses. But all those witnesses went to the same single source instead of going to multiple sources, and that's how these things get spread, and they're not accurate. So the next time you hear somebody say bloods plural in Genesis 4:10 is talking about the descendants that would never be born or the victims of murder all through the ages, they're wrong. I don't care what one midrash says. The truth is, regarding the use of the language from people who are really good at that and don't have a dog in the hunt theologically as far as this particular issue goes, they'll tell you that it's because it was the flow of blood, that the plural is about that, not about any descendants or anything or people in the future. It's about what's going on right now. It is the present tense. His blood is crying out to me. So, when it says hark there, it's like, do you hear that sound? You can almost, in modern parlance, God would be saying, do you hear that sound? That's the sound of your brother's blood crying from the ground. Right now, when he's saying that, his blood is crying out to me right now because his blood is shed. It's flowing on the ground right now. So that's what the plural means. And we know it means that because of the source materials we went to, besides this one midrash. And yeah, the rabbis could be wrong about a great many things, to borrow a phrase from Star Wars. Everybody can be wrong about a great many things, but when you put them all together and cross-examine them, like it says to do in Proverbs 18:13, to hear a matter without, or to decide a matter without hearing it is folly and shame, and then Proverbs 18:17 that says, the first to speak or present their case always seems right until they're cross-examined. You've got to cross-examine. You have to look into it, and when you look into it, cross-examine. That's what those two verses mean, Proverbs 18:13 and 17. So yeah, people conclude all sorts of silly things, and they get their silly things from a midrash and say, I have an authoritative source. But then you look at their authoritative source, and you look for counter arguments to the authoritative source, and you find them, and then you make your own conclusion. Then you can say you've thoroughly studied a matter. So I just wanted to walk you guys through this process because it's important, no matter what the topic, that you don't just take things at face value, even from people who say, look at my source. It's a Jew, therefore they know Hebrew, therefore it's authoritative and it can't be wrong. And then they'll run with that without doing due diligence in cross-examining their source. So yeah, people do silly things. They take things and run with them. It's hard to avoid. We all do that. I do that sometimes. It's just like, because I'm either don't care or I'm busy or it's off topic to what I'm thinking about at the moment. Whatever the reason, we often pick up things through life that we really haven't checked out. Yeah, the same with catechisms or from even creeds. Everybody's got their go-to sayings or official documents of whatever sect or denomination, who supposedly did all the heavy lifting, and we don't need to do that anymore. But the Bible says study to show yourself approved. It doesn't say find a good spoon feeder and stick with them. And thanks for that, Chow, in the chat there. Haven't seen Droid in a while. I know there's hurricanes and stuff going on in his area, so hopefully they have power down there. Keep all each other in prayer. We have some major decisions coming up regarding our housing. It's just hard to navigate that kind of market right now. We have some health issues. My shoulder is still really bugging me. It's the one I fell on like end of August. I tore something. I don't know. But when our location of where we're going to be living is up in the air, it's hard to make a doctor's appointment and get it looked at. But it's still kind of hard to lift my right arm. But anyway, also one of my sons, he had LASIK surgery. One eye is good. The other eye is still blurry. So if you could pray for that. Everybody's got income, job, whatever issues, what to do in these perilous times. So, but thank you for that, and pray for each other. Remember Droid down there in where he's near the Gulf. I think he's right on the Gulf of Mexico. Near the what is that? Lake Pontchartrain, somewhere down there. He's really close to that, I think. So whatever the weather's doing, he may be out of power or something down there. But anyway, also, I don't know anybody noticed or cared. I haven't been going to the Flat Earth Debate channel, Nathan's channel, recently. If anybody wants to know why, I might as well, because I've only been running half an hour. And if you don't care about this stuff, you can stop the video here if you're watching it later. I've been kind of keeping my distance. Yes, he's in, I believe he is in somewhere near New Orleans, if not in it. But anyway, I've been kind of keeping my distance from that community just because of the toxicity levels for a long time. You can't just go every day, sit and listen to a place where the favorite draw, the big draw of the channel is listening to someone get pummeled. Whether they deserve it or not is beside the point. This is not a good place to live. I don't want to live in a fight club or cage match arena. It's just not my thing. But more recently, there was, I think over a year ago, an effort to make his, what they call the housekeeping questions into a book. Now, when you're writing your first book, you can't do the graduate level material. You're reaching out to a general audience, and there's a way to do that. Now, he had one of the people on the panel there, the regulars, who's been off because his wife had been extremely ill. He has a friend who's an experienced publisher, author, successful author, has Flat Earth books that are out selling anti-Flat Earth books. And the two of them spent untold hours wading through all the live stream footage. And there's like hours of live stream every single day on weekdays for years. And they went through those and tried to get it distilled down to an introductory book form. So many hours. My only part in it was some brief grammatical proofreading, before they decided they were getting ready to publish. And all those hours, all that effort, all for free. And one day, I guess Nathan brought the content of the book to the attention of his panel, and they decided to dispense with everything that had been done, go back to square one and totally rewrite the book. So now it's being done by a committee. All of the people involved are friends. And when one friend totally wastes many days and hours of another friend's life, it's just really something I can't deal with. And so I decided to just fade out of there. Because it's just inexplicable, it's inexcusable. You don't treat friends like that. So it's not something that happened to me. It's happened to my friends. Yeah, 10th, and as far as I know, it's waiting to go home. To use a Christian phrase, they're waiting for her to go home, and very tough to go through. And that's at this time, and also the time when the publisher had a major health scare of his own, only to find out that their work for the past year had been completely swept away, flushed away, and is now being replaced by a committee who have no experience with publishing, no experience with writing books, but decided they would do a much better job. So I just cannot abide by that. I can't fix it. So I'm not there anymore. So if anybody wants to know, then that's the reason. So, like I said, if you're watching this later, don't care about the ins and outs of a community that has nothing really to do with this one. And I will, from time to time, like I said, I've got major decisions to make about whether we're going to buy a house. Basically, there's 3 of us going in on it because one person can't afford a house anymore. But it has to be big enough for the 3 people. So anyway, but we found one that might be doable, but it's still a major decision. And we'll be going to see that house today. So anyway, and it involves getting out of our lease early and all sorts of things. And it's just like, we want to know what God wants. But it's interesting that this opportunity happened only after we had concluded that we're so outpriced in the housing market here that we have no hope of it, and we were going to tell the realtor to stop looking, and then boom, this thing fell from the sky. I don't know if we're still going to take it. We just need to make a good decision. Hey, Wendy, good to see you. Yeah, I wasn't just about to shut down. Sorry. But yeah, we live in interesting times. Also, keep in mind, Wendy's got ongoing health problems. I've got enough of them on my own. I just wish I could lift my right arm normally without agonizing pain. And the thing is, even if I did get it imaged to find out what's wrong, I don't know if I would actually get surgery, because I've heard too many bad things about shoulder surgery that it really doesn't help. So we'll just see. I just want to know what's wrong so I know how not to hurt it more. Let's see. Child says, patron of Nathan's, but I have issues. How, yeah. Yeah, it's not, Nathan has been one of my strongest supporters of my channel. I wouldn't have half the subs I have without him. He says nice things about me, and this is why it makes it so difficult for me to say anything about what just happened. But I had to do something. So I decided just to go away, and that's my go-to solution a lot of times. Maybe that's wrong sometimes, but in this case, that's all I can do. So anyway, yeah, I'm sure everybody's got a health problem or a decision, and again, keep in mind Droid, because he lives where there's hurricanes. I live where there's tornadoes, but at least where we are and where we're going are looking relatively safe. Because I was thinking otherwise, the only things we can afford are trailer parks, and you don't want to live in one of those around here. They're death traps. So anyway, but yeah, I don't have any ill will toward Nathan or his channel or the panel members. I just think they did a really insensitive and I don't know, disloyal thing. And I hope someday it's resolved, but at this point, the timing of it and the number of hours that friends put in is just really bothering me. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I wanted to mainly not talk about that, but about how to do research, how to know when you've done enough of it. And this is an interesting question anyway, because it's linguistic and that's kind of what I do. Let's just see. Yeah, thanks, Wendy, for that. I don't know if I need to read everything out because it's on the screen, but we really appreciate you. Anytime people are keeping other people in prayer, prayer warriors are the backbone of any Christian community. Yeah, life does that, and like I said, if we wind up moving suddenly when we were not planning to, and we just moved like 6 months ago, and it's very expensive because we're too arthritic and injured to do any of it ourselves, so we have to pay people to do it for us, to pack up, load, unload, and it's very expensive, and we just can't do it anymore. So, plus you need money to put down if you buy a house, and it's just crazy. What are we thinking? Like I said, we had given up. We weren't going to look anymore. And then the one opportunity came up. I still don't know if we'll accept it. I don't know if it's a test or an answer to prayer. I don't know. All I ask for, and I think it'd be good for everyone to do, is just for God to open only one door and make you go through it and close all the other ones so you can't do something stupid. That's all I ask for. So, we have a very small gathering here, but a good, solid, quality one, and that's what matters. I was going to try to do some passive income by monetizing the channel, but I need like 200 more watch hours, and I don't know if I do enough material. There's been other channels I've been going to lately. Well, I think I mentioned this last time. God Logic and Standing for Truth and Radar Apologetics are three decent ones. They're well-run channels. You get some characters, and all three of them have some theological position that I just strongly oppose. But I can learn things there, and there are Christians there, and it's a place to hang out. And the only thing that bothers me the most is sometimes they all run at the same time, and I'm like, well, yes, I can play it later, but I like to be in the live chats. But anyhow, yeah, this is all I had going on today. I don't know if, when, what. Like I said, there's things going on, so I don't know if I'll have time to do any research. It's just unknown. We're going to see the house tonight. I just pray that we make right decisions and ask the right questions and so forth, and that the financing works out better than we're being told, although it's doable, but scary. Anyway, let's see. I saw God Logic videos yesterday with Radar, and they were debating with some Jewish people that came in. Disagreeing with God Logic was when he jumped in with the Catholics. Yeah, I didn't see all of it, so I might have missed that part, but because I was trying to watch something else at the same time. So I can watch two chats, but I can only listen to one video, so that's what I do sometimes. Anyway, and let's see, just seeing if you guys have anything else. And maybe if I did get monetized, I might do, like, for members, do like private chit-chat Q&A or something. How some channels have shown up in my recommendation has really led me to believe that some people are truly demon-possessed. I agree. Their behavior is so far out of the norm. Yeah, well, I think a lot of us are living as, not only we've been around a while, but we also have our Christian background that makes these things more obvious to us. So anyway, yeah, all of them have something I disagree with. And as you know, as far as with the, I think it's Radar Apologetics, the guy is a rabbi in a Messianic congregation. So I expect, I don't know, I haven't researched his theology that much, but you know what my opinion is of Hebrew roots. But I think the same for, let's see, is that the Standing for Truth believes that it believes basically in replacement theology in some form. I could be mistaken. That's just kind of the impression I have in my head right now. So don't quote me on that. Um, anyway, God Logic knows the Quran and the Hadith and all that and can just slap Muslims around left and right. Um, the radar guy is Hebrew and brings out some interesting points. Um, and Standing for Truth, like I said, is he's looking at his videos. He's mostly about evolution and things like that, countering evolution and atheism. So anyway, I guess I don't need to have this page on the screen all the time, but this is what it's all about: to be discerning, to know how to be discerning, and do due diligence when if you're going to do a serious study about anything. So it says I have 12 current viewers. That's nothing to write home about, but I'm just glad it's not zero. So anyway, I think I will shut down for the day. I do have other things going on, and thanks again, everybody, for coming. I seem to have pushed the buttons in the right order today to get this started. I think part of the reason I wanted to go live is because I need to learn how to do that through OBS, and it helps if I do that more than once, like in a year. So anyway, hope to see you guys around, and thanks for prayers, and we will see you all next time.